Well, Jonathan thinks that James is the earliest epistle. I think it's one of the last 5. I think that when James says to the 12 tribes scattered in diaspora, he's actually already pulled from Paul, having said the Gentiles are grafted in and they're part of the 12 tribes. And this is actually after the diaspora of Emperor Titus. This is way, 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 way later. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it was written. But I think that gives the whole letter, and particularly the section we're going to be looking at today, a bit of a different flavor. It's interesting to think about. Last week we dealt with partiality, the idea that we could use our fallen, selfish standards to try and judge the value of someone else, an idea that we saw completely transgresses the law. This is right out. And immediately thereafter, James is going to turn around and continue this theme of, hey, confront how your belief matches up with your practice. You can make professions till the cows come home, but what is your real religion? So we're going to deal today with faith without works is dead. And before we get started with the text, let's put up a couple of guardrails here. We're going to deal with 3 words that we want to be real sure what do they mean. 3 words. We have the word for death. We'll just come over here. And death, this is nekros. Uh-oh, I am not writing for some reason. Right. I remember you told me something. Nekros. This is death. Nekros. That's Greek. Sorry, my Greek's not great. Dekros.
That's why you can read it.
Yeah, that's why you can't read it, because it's in Greek. Sure. That is really, really big. Can I make that smaller? Oh, it's because I'm zoomed in so much, isn't it? Nekros. 132 times. This is translated as death. The next one we have is ergon. Ergon. This is works. Translated as works or deeds 174 times in the New Testament. The last one we have is pistis. Pistis. Pistis is faith. Translated so 239 times. Now, very often when theologians stand up behind a pulpit and they do a word study, they start to tell you, you think this word means this, but it actually means this. This is the opposite. What we have here is the example that so many times throughout the entire Bible, these words are used and they are translated the same way. There is no doubt whatsoever what these words mean. Faith means faith, works means works, and death means death. So don't let that confuse anyone. There's no wiggle room about what exactly do these words mean. That done. We also want to keep this letter in the context to which it was written. This was not a gospel written to Theophilus in Greece, somebody who didn't know the Word of God, didn't know the Scriptures. This is written to people who are studied of the Old Testament and contemporaries of the apostles. They should know what's going on. They have the whole law and the prophets and the gospel in their head rolling around in there. And James is writing to clarify that. That doesn't mean it's not true for non-believers, but that's way less important than this is written in the context of from apostles to people who do believe in Christ. And with that, let's go through this somewhat heavy text. This is the word of the Lord. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith is active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works, and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. This is the word of the Lord. Praise be to God. For the evangelical Christian, there can be surely no more vexing passage this side of Ecclesiastes. You just internalize, by grace you were saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast, and then this comes and hits you right square in between the eyes. What is going on here? How is this not completely contradictory to what Paul wrote when he started writing epistles? If we're saved by grace through faith and not by works, does James consider that our saving faith is a dead faith? Surely he doesn't mean to say that our faith comes from a dead faith. So what's going on here? Unfortunately, a strange turn, even for me, we're going to do math problems at church. Okay, kind of. We're going to do logic. We have this idea rolling around in our heads that we have faith. Yeah, it's not going to be big enough. Let's make something big here. We have faith.
Big faith.
And we have works. And then we have salvation. And that's this space that inhabits where our faith and our works meet. No! We know that's not true. We cannot say that faith plus works yields salvation. Right? That's the whole deal with Colossians is it's faith plus nothing. Jesus plus nothing. So we know this is not what we're trying to say. But what we're trying to say is that faith yields works. The basis for works that are good is our faith. Now, what about this one? What if I propose works yields faith? No. We're going to deal with what works without faith is in a minute, but that doesn't work. However, what does work is that faith yields works, yields faith, yields works, yields over and over and over. If we're aligned correctly, that's the formula. That's the math that James is talking about. So what then is our salvation?
The fact that we would accept Jesus and that His Holy Spirit is
And we have accepted.
He has spoken correctly. I'm going to change that to math. Salvation equals faith yields works. This is righteousness. So we go back over here to our bad Venn diagram. Hey, let's make one that's right. I've done it again. I've tried this before, but never with the pen. Sorry, guys. Faith works. What is this? Righteousness. Change color here real quick. So what is this? Where we profess to believe, but don't practice. This is dead. I'm going to spend the rest of the sermon proving it. This is dead. Hey, what's this over here? Works without faith. This is vanity. This is vanity. This is where we act, but we don't believe. Questions so far? All right. The weirdest sermon I've ever done.
The most math I've seen done.
The most math I've ever done in church.
Amen.
See if we can't get most of this here. You'll have to ignore the bad Venn diagram. So James is trying to tell us that to the extent that we don't practice what we profess to believe, we either don't understand what we're professing or we don't actually believe what we're saying. Let me say that again. We either don't understand what we're professing or we don't believe truly, actually, in reality, we don't believe the things that we're saying. If you tell someone, go and be warm, but you don't give them a blanket and you don't give them fuel and you don't give them something to eat, you either don't understand what hot and cold are, or you don't actually believe they're going to be warm. A faith that is really, truly placed in the teachings of the gospel is transformative. It literally turns you from one creature into a new creature, a new heart, a new essence, a new nature. So if your heart is not transformed by faith in the gospel, you either don't understand the gospel or you don't actually believe it.
Or you don't have the Spirit.
Or you don't have the Spirit at all. And there's all sorts of things we can put our faith in. Only one of them is transformative.
That's right.
Only one of them gives us a new heart and a new nature and a new essence. In fact, we could even go a step further, right? We can come over here and say, oh, there's some places where we it's gonna deal. I'm about to have a problem. Maybe. Nope. Yes, there we are. Sometimes in our profession, there's a little bubble here, right? There's a little thing that belongs, but we don't actually practice that thing that we preach, right? What are some examples? How about fasting? Who here professes fasting? I do, but I don't practice it. My faith in fasting is dead. Why? Because it doesn't transform me. In confessional honesty, that's a problem that I have. It's a problem that I've dealt with for a long time. But that's what that looks like. I know that fasting belongs in our homily, in our liturgy. I know that it's true. I know that. But my faith there is dead because it doesn't transform how I act. I pray to God a lot that that would change, and it hasn't yet. And this can get, I don't want to get bigger. This can get real nefarious too, right? Sometimes we can end up with a whole bunch of stuff. We just, that's for someone else. Let someone else be transparent. That's not my gifting, right? Oh, I'm not gifted to preach. I'm not gifted to evangelize. Let me tell you what, Christian, whether you're gifted or not, you're under orders to evangelize. The Great Commission is not a preference.
Yeah.
Good soldiers follow orders. James issues his readers a challenge in verse 18. He says, "Show me your faith apart from works." How does one do that?
Can't open a door in the heart to show what's in the heart.
It's a logical contradiction. It's not possible to show someone an abstraction. The very meaning of those words is you can't show me a thing that doesn't exist. You can't make material evidence out of the immaterial truth. A dead faith that does not compel action is at best abstract, if it can even be said to exist at all. So there certainly can never be a material evidence created for it. How do we show our faith? He immediately follows up with the answer. Your works reveal your faith. Your works are the testimony of your faith. Those things which you do, which you practice, which you proceed with, which overflows from your faith, those are the evidences of your faith. That's what your faith means. Why do we need to do this?
Because we're a different person than we were before we had faith.
God bless us, right? This afternoon, another church called a pastor. Hey, should we call Brian to be our pastor? I don't know. Is he smarter than a demon? Well, he thinks that he can make a profession and that be evidence of his faith without actually, giving people the things to be warm. Oh, well, guess not. It's foolish. Like, it's laughable. We put it in terms like that. Yet how easy is it for us to do that? We act like we are a person of great faith because we talk about it. Right? You talk a mad game. Everybody talks a mad game till the bullets start flying, right? All of a sudden, you got to make war with the demons. Are you more than hot air?
And bullets.
And bullets? So let's step back from this for a second, because that's a lot to digest. Go back to chapter 1 of James. Remember last week we talked about chapter 1 sort of has this glossary overview of all the things we're going to talk about. take a quick look at chapter 1 and see which of those sections do you think this is reflecting back to? You're looking for hearers of the word, but doers also.
Into the chapter.
Yeah. So chapter 1, it's 19 through 27. So at your tables, I want you guys to take a few minutes, look at both of these passages in context. I probably should have put it on the board, but I didn't. Look at chapter 1 and chapter 2, 14 through 26. And I want you to compare and see if you can find 2 or 3 important comparisons. And then there's one really important contrast, very important difference between these two. And I'm going to give you guys not a short time, but a long time to chew this up. Take 10 or 15 minutes, facilitators, come up with 2 or 3 important comparisons between these, and then one contrast. There's a very important distinction between these two. We'll come back together in a few minutes. Okay. Table 1. I don't care. I just said table 1. Somebody says, is that us? Sure. I see you have volunteered to go first.
Yes.
What do we see? How are these things comparable?
Alyssa bequeathed unto me to be her mouthpiece, as Aaron was unto Moses.
Prophesy, my brother.
The biggest thing we saw as similar was that you had the kind of like an inside and an outside participation. So there was the hearer, which would be the faith in chapter 2, and then you have the doer, which would be the works in chapter 2. The other thing, which I don't know if it's a contrast or similarity.
Okay.
We said that chapter 1 really emphasizes those things in relation to the word, and chapter 2 really emphasizes those things in relation to more of your faith life.
Okay.
So I didn't know if that was meant to be because faith comes out of, and is intimately tied to the word and whatnot. I wasn't sure if that was contrast or similar. But
good. We're shifting some paradigms around. Effective preaching is taking place, I guess. Other table, what do we think? Similarities?
Well, in chapter 1, I think it was 23 and 24, talking about the mirror. You look at yourself and you walk away and forget. And it's kind of like with doing what you've learned and believed is a way also of not forgetting what you really believe.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't. And another one was when you say we have faith and we can do the acts when we're in church with believers, not when it's hard.
Contrasts.
When you're going to do the acts.
Contrasts. What's the big key difference between these two passages? What do I think it is?
I want to know what table 2 got.
I do too.
We can no.
Did you come up with a contrast?
No, we just liked comparing.
Okay. That's fair. I've been there. Yeah.
Okay.
We for sure didn't have 2 minutes.
We're willing to take a swing at it.
All right, take a swing at it.
So we said that chapter 1 went ahead and contrasted what the absence of this looks like more than chapter 2 did. So it gave you the negative side. If you don't do this, this is what's waiting for you. Did I say that?
Yeah.
That's definitely true. Taking nothing away from that, however. It's a good try. The most important contrast here is that chapter 1 is dealing with yourself. That's an inward relationship between you and God, between you and yourself. Chapter 2 is dealing with how do you deal with others. Hang on just a second, but make sure, yeah.
So in chapter 1, where it talks about good religion, taking care of others, you would say is an inward thing, not an outward thing.
That's to address your inward question. Hey, what is it we're supposed to practice? Oh, you don't know what to believe? Believe me. You need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. That's the true religion here. Chapter 2 is saying, how are you going to act towards people? Remember, we just talked about partiality. How are you going to act towards people? Are you going to glorify the rich person? No. And in fact, when you profess a thing and don't turn around and live out that profession, you've really messed it. You're not even smarter than a demon, right? You've made a real fool of yourself. That's what I took to be the biggest contrast between these two. You're right. That they're right at the end of chapter 1. It does say this is the true religion, to go and do. Doing was kind of on James's mind, I think. Okay, I want to take a few more minutes because I want to deal with a couple of arcs, patriarch and a matriarch. What's up with Abraham? Abraham is justified by his faith, by his works, right? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works? Let's be real careful and read this very carefully. Abraham, our father, is justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar. Faith was active along with works and completed by works. So what James is saying is no. Abraham is justified by faith, and faith alone, by Christ alone, according to the scriptures alone. But his faith is not complete until he lifts the knife above his son's head. Until he lives out that faith, it's not actually faith. It's death. It's dead. But when Abraham follows through on the profession that he has, the faith alone is made manifest, is complete, is fulfilled in the work that he does. Through that work, we see righteousness, right? Remember over here, faith and works coalescing together, that makes righteousness. Habakkuk 2, the righteous shall live by faith, right? So Abraham is not saved because he was prepared to sacrifice Isaac. And he's not saved because he did sacrifice a ram. He's saved because he had faith in God way back before Sarah had ever conceived. And it was credited to him as righteousness. We can see that it was true faith through the acts that he does, through the work that he does. The work that he does not cause or underpin or promote or base or gird or sustain his salvation. But it is the result of the transformation that occurs in Abraham because he is in covenant with God. And then finally we get to this business with Rahab. Rahab is justified by works when she receives the messengers and sends them another way. We're going to go back to Joshua 2. Joshua 2 and 6. So we remember Joshua has this great speech, be strong and courageous that your God may love thee. And immediately he sends spies. Hey, I told them, go and do the thing that Caleb and I did. And remember, don't come back here telling me about no giants. I've been. And the spies go to Jericho because the first challenge they have, if they don't take Jericho, this campaign is going nowhere. And so the men go to Jericho and they meet this prostitute named Rahab who lives in the wall. She and her whole household live in the wall. And she tells the men, I know, this is verse 9, I know the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and the earth beneath. We'll stop right there. What does that look like to y'all? What does that sound like? That's a confession of faith, right? That's better than I had before I was baptized. The Lord your God, he is God in heaven and on earth. So there we have faith. What happens to the faithful? The righteous shall live by faith. Right? So do we see a completion of this? Yes. Verse 15. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built in the city wall, so she lived in the wall. And she said to them, go to the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until they have returned. And after they return, you may go your way. We see the work based on the faith. What happens? Joshua 6, Jericho comes tumbling down, and Joshua immediately sends the men and says, go find Rahab and her household. So the young men, 23, the young men who had been spies, when they brought out Rahab and her father and her brothers and all who belonged to her, and they brought all her relatives and put them outside the camp, and they burned the city with fire and everything in it, only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put in the treasury of the house of the Lord. Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Rahab is enormously blessed because of her act of faith. How much? Somebody go to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1, I think it's about verse 6. We find out who Boaz's mother was. Rahab has a son.
It says, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth.
Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. Rahab has faith, and it is credited to her as righteousness. And the righteous shall live. Rahab, who looked at two men and said, your God is God, and I want in on that. She gets all the way in on that. Imagine the faith of a mustard seed in practice, casting mountains into the sea. So what will we put our faith in? To what will we bind our hearts? The communion of the Lord is not a mere symbol or commemoration of some ancient event that took place, but is the communing, the coming together, the binding of our hearts with Christ. The communion does not save, but it is a natural downstream product of our salvation. It is not for good people, but for those of us who know that we are far more disastrously sinful than we could ever admit, and also far more loved and forgiven than we have words to express.